Hello everyone, this video covers a waterfall on Indian Creek near Riffe Lake in Washington. The video is about a half hour long because I also rattle on about my canoe, the changing lake levels, abandoned roads in the area, or whatever. For those who just want to see the best footage of the falls without all the BS, I recommend fast forwarding to the 17-minute mark and then eject yourself at about 4 minutes after that. For everyone else, I guess just grab some popcorn and enjoy. That's the coordinates of the falls. They're about a half mile upstream from the shore, depending upon the lake levels, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Zooming in on Google Earth, you'll see that the bottom tier of the falls shows up quite well. Indian Creek essentially drains into the southernmost portion of the lake. If you happen to have your boat in just the right spot, you can see the falls from the lake. However, with the current lowered lake levels, that may no longer be the case, and I'll explain that a little later. Views from the north shore, about 1.5 to 1 3/4 miles away, are possible also, but you'll probably need a good set of binoculars. This was taken with a 400mm lens on a full-frame camera. The easiest way to gain access to Indian Creek would be by boat, and currently the closest usable boat launch would be at Tadnapam North, which is on the east side of the lake. Recent earthquake studies show that a 7.5 magnitude quake nearby the Mossy Rock Dam could cause damage to the spillway piers shown here. Failure of the piers at full lake levels could cause a regional flooding event to downstream communities. Therefore, 30 feet below full capacity will now be the current high level. Maintaining that new level means that we will be seeing more water released over the spillway in the spring. Cool to watch, but higher boat launches like Cosmos will be unusable and remain closed. Essentially, 2 boat launches remain usable. Mossy Rock Park, near the west end of the lake, and about 1.5 miles from the dam, would be about an 8-mile ride to Indian Creek. And the launch I chose at Tadnapam North, near the east end of the lake, would be about a 5-mile ride. Okay, so we're heading west in my 16-foot Coleman Canoe. That's canoe with an S in front of it. I purchased it back in 1995 or 1996 from G.I. Joe's. Remember that place? It has a 40-inch beam, so it's quite stable for a canoe. Unfortunately, this width also makes it a bit slow for paddling, but the flat back allows for up to 5 horsepower motor. I started out with a very small 2-speed electric trolling motor my dad had from back in the 60s or 70s. It pushed the canoe around at about 3 miles an hour. About a year later, I purchased a 27-pound thrust electric motor you see up front. That bumped the speed up to about 4 miles an hour. With a good deep cycle battery, I could safely get about 10 miles out of it before needing a recharge. The latest upgrade came in 2002 when I got a 2-horsepower Honda gas motor for it. I can now cruise around at 3/4 throttle, which yields about 6 miles per hour. At full throttle, it'll do about 6.5. If I really need to get somewhere fast, leaning way forward to level out the canoe will gain an additional 1 mile per hour. After about an hour of trying to convince myself that this is still better than the hook fin raft I built over 35 years ago, I began to approach the Indian Creek drainage. The first quarter-mile bushwhack through the woods was fairly easy and pleasant. I never had to forge the main section of creek on the left, but there was a smaller stream on the right that I crossed at least twice on my way up. Not sure if this stream was a diversion from the main creek, or if it was fed from some other source. I was also looking for signs of an old road that would have followed along the upper shoreline of the lake. Sections of it are clearly defined and still appear to get at least some mild foot traffic, especially near the Landers Creek area about 1¼ miles to the east, where an old bridge still stands and crosses Landers near their mouth. Maps show the road terminating about 3/4 of a mile past Indian Creek. Exploring this road and learning of its history is on my to-do list, as it could be an alternative method to access Indian Creek if a boat is not an option. I thought I could see traces of a short spur road on the other side of the creek, but I never crossed to check it out. When I reached this point, I figured it might be the end of the line. Cliffs on both sides were nearly vertical, and attempting to pick my way through the creek would guarantee that I would get wet and possibly ruin my camera and other toys in my backpack in the process. I figured I could always make a second attempt at it sometime later with some hip waders that had grippier boots and my equipment in sealed containers. My GPS said I was only 0.14 miles from the falls, so if the terrain didn't get any tougher than this, then seeing the falls in person was a high probability. As it turned out, I only had to backtrack about 50 yards, climb up the hill a little ways, and then continue following the creek on up along the right side. As expected, it was a steep side hill most of the way and brushy in spots, but I eventually was able to drop back in to within 70 yards of the falls. Once again, I chickened out on trying to climb up large slippery rocks with water running over them, so I never did get a closer view or see the base of the falls. However, I made an attempt at taking a few measurements of what I could see anyway. From the top of the upper rock in the foreground to the top of the bottom tier, I measured about 62 feet. From the top of the upper tier to the top of the lower tier, I got 50 feet. To confirm the total, I took a measurement from the top of the rock to the top of the upper tier and was getting 112 to 113 feet. I feel pretty confident about the upper tier measurement, but without getting a good line of sight on the base, the lower tier could be several feet shorter. After I got back home and looked over the pictures, I noticed that the view of the falls from the lake looked totally different than what I saw up close. As it turns out, the bottom tier is almost totally hidden when viewed from the lake. However, an upper or third tier that I could not see 70 yards away from the falls reveals itself when viewed out in Riffe Lake, about a mile away. Two years later, I returned to Indian Creek, this time with a drone in my arsenal that I've been terrorizing my neighbors with for about a year. I decided to put it to some good use and get a bird's eye view on what the falls, in its entirety, is all about.
breaking out 4 aircraft on the radar, not 1 pair, 2 pair. Repeat, 4 bogeys. Wood, we've got 4 bogeys. Wrong! Make that 5!
There's 5, sir.
That's 5.
Yes, sir.
Alright, so I'm just going to continue on up the creek here and see if there's anything else of significance along the way. Not sure what I will lose first, controller reception as it snakes around the trees, or the ability to gain any more altitude as the terrain quickly gets higher and higher the further we go. Either way, I don't think this is going to take too long before I will need to do a 180 and head back. Looks like the creek runs through some sort of a rock slide thingy here. Looks like a small falls there. Looks like there's some sort of falls here around the bend. Or it might just be like some sort of a narrow chute or something. But there's something, a little mini guy there hidden in the shadows. And that's just about the time I lose reception, of course. So I gotta head back. About 2 months later, I returned again with the drone. I felt the sun and shadow lighting conditions in the previous footage did not do the falls any justice. Mostly cloudy was the forecast for the day, but they were quickly beginning to break up, so I needed to hurry to make sure I did not miss out on the more even lighting I was hoping to take advantage of. And yes, I did get a little too close to the lake for comfort there. 2 things really caught my eye as I made my way on shore this time. One was a complete lack of creek in the creek bed. The other was this half-buried, rusty old culvert seen here. It could be that the culvert was used for the road I mentioned about earlier, that shows on some maps passing through here. The culvert seems a little small for a permanent road structure over a creek this size, which leads me to believe that the road was only intended for a short-term logging operation, probably during the summer months of 1 year only. These arrows mark the, well, let's just say as close as I was able to safely get to the falls on foot location. Yeah, that works.
weather started getting rough, the tiny ship was tossed. If not for the courage of the fearless crew,
The canoe would be lost. The canoe would be lost. No, not as bad as what the SS Minnow went through, but Riffe Lake is known to get a bit choppy at times. In fact, they have a sign posted at the boat launch warning about how conditions can change here without much warning. This time, the wind was to my back, so any waves that would have otherwise broke over the bow and into the boat were for the most part blown forward and out of the way. My final visit to the falls, at least as far as this video is concerned, occurred about 2.5 months later. The Seattle area broke a record by having 56 days without any measurable precipitation. After that, and to this day, only 0.02 inches have fallen. So in reality, it has been about 90 days without any significant rainfall. The effects of that dry streak can be seen by the amount of smoke in the air from various wildfires throughout the Northwest. My goal today is to determine if the falls on Indian Creek flow year-round. If it is not totally dried up today, then it probably never will be, at least under normal seasonal conditions. Okay, so we've seen mid-spring as well as early and late summer conditions at the falls. What I'd really like to see next is the heavy runoff during a local flooding situation. But the chance of getting over to Indian Creek after several days of heavy rain, with a break in the weather, on a weekend, and assuming at least one boat launch is open, well, let's just say that could take a while. I do hope that you enjoyed what I showed so far. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.